As we come to the end of the month of Elul, the month of Tshuva, and then going into Aseres Yemei Tshuva, which is the time for Tshuva, we're going to be learning some very special sichos of the Rebbe on the comments of the Rebbe's father on Igeres Hatshuva and Tanya. There are sichos that are printed here in Chelek Yutes, the Chelek that we're learning now. There are additional sichos that are printed in Chelek Lametes that we'll also learn in Mitzvah Shem. And we start today with the first sicha, which is going to be based on comments of the Rebbe's father on the third Perek in Igeres Hatshuva. The shir today is being learned L'nishmas Rabbi Yosef ben Yamin ben Rabbi Menashe Koltman. The Kvies von Esren Ba'av Yom Ha'ilulu von Taten, the time of the yahrzeit of the Rebbe's father on the 20th of Av is Bekama v'kama shanim in dem Vach, was hier Shabbos is Boi Mevarchim Chodesh Elul. It's in the week where that Shabbos, it's the Shabbos Mevarchim of the following month of Elul. Der Chodesh was es verbunden mit Tshuva, the month which is connected to Tshuva. That Melanen the erste Ha'are von dem Bali Lula in Igeres Hatshuva. We'll learn here the first comment of the Bali Lula, of the Bali Yahrzeit, the Rebbe's father, on Igeres Hatshuva. In Igeres Hatshuva bringt the Alter Rebbe, in Igeres Hatshuva in the third Perek, the Alter Rebbe brings the Deya, the opinion, as B'shas Eine is begangen demselben Chet vielmal. If one transgressed and did the same Aveda many times, darf fasten der Mispar Atzeimis, was is bestimmt von dem Chet, as so viel Mal, wie viel hat gesündigt. So then he should fast the set number of fasts for this, to atone for this Aveda, according to the amount of times that he sinned. So just as an introduction here, the Alter Rebbe in Tanya says that in order for a person, after he has the full kapara through tshuva, in order to be completely accepted by the Eibishter, as it was before he did the Aveda, so in the time of the Beis HaMikdash, there were karbanis brought for this, karban oila, or karban chatos. So today, when we don't have the karbanis, the full acceptance by the Eibishter is through tiniest, through fasting. Similar to a carbon where you're giving the chelev and the dam, the fats and the blood of the animal for the carbon. So the miyat of the chelev and the dam, minimizing a person's fats and blood by fasting, is a sacrifice. And therefore there are various different amounts of fasts that it says in Sfarim that deal with this, what each Aveda requires in order to have this full appeasement and acceptance by Hashem. So here what the Alter Rebbe is discussing in Perek Gimel is when a person did the same Aveda many times, so how many times does he have to fast if it's the same Aveda on one hand, but he repeated it many times? So one opinion the Alter Rebbe quotes is that he has to fast, for every time he did the Aveda, he'll have to fast again to atone for this, or to be fully accepted for this. And the language the Alter Rebbe says is, Pa'amim rabbis kefia mispar hashachat. He has to fast many times, according to the number of times that he sinned and did this one Aveda. When his mamshech, the Alter Rebbe continues, an example for this would be a person that there's a wasted seminal emission, the Aveda that the Alter Rebbe mentions in Igeres Hatshuva here a few times, was the Mispar Atzeimis Vadechet is paid Dalatinius. The number to fast for this Aveda is 84 fasts. Is imchot bezeh esay esrim pomim. So the Alter Rebbe says as follows: if a person had sinned this Aveda 10 or 20 times, al derech mashal, for instance, sarech leis anais esay esrim pomim peidalid, he should fast 10 or 20 times, 84 fasts. That's the number of fasts for this Aveda. And then the Alter Rebbe adds v'chein lo'ilam, and so too this would apply forever. Whatever amount of number of times he transgressed and did this Aveda, that's the amount of times he has to fast, pay dalit tinius. Is mevaye the tate in seine Oris of Tanya. So the Rebbe's father, in his comments on Tanya, which were written when the Rebbe's father was exiled in far away, and he didn't have much ink, the Rebbe's mother prepared for him from herbs and grass ink to be able to write, and he wrote it on the sides of the actual Tanya, on the margins of the Tanya. As the Alter Rebbe sagt the mashal, Esrei Esrim, the Alter Rebbe uses the example of 10 or 20 times, weil the pegam durch dem chet is in chokhmah, because this Aveda has a blemish in the level of chokhmah in the person's soul. Sagt weiter in Igeres Hatshuva, and this is mentioned later on in Igeres Hatshuva, as der chet is poigim b'moyach. This chet, this wasted emission, it blemishes in the person's brain. Was mit dem Wort b'moyach meinte be'iker im moyach ha'chochmeh. When the Alter Rebbe says moyach, he means primarily in the level of chochmeh, wisdom, or really chochmeh is loosely translated as wisdom, but it refers to a very deep level in chochmeh. We're talking here about the chochmeh of the neshama, which is very deeply connected to Hashem. And this aveda of the wasted emission blemishes there in that connection in the moyach ha'chochmeh to Hashem. The Rebbe bringt die Dugme Eser ay Esrim. So the Alter Rebbe specifically brings an example of 10 or 20 times. Chochmeh is the Ois Yud M'Shem Havaya. Chochmeh, in the Eibishter's name, Yud-Kei, Vav-Kei, so the Yud, first letter, hints to Chochmeh, the godly revelation that there is in Chochmeh. And so too, in the soul of every Yid, every single Yid has a neshama, which is a Chelek, a Lekah, Mimal Mamish. So the neshama of a Yid also has in it the levels of Yud-Kei, Vav-Kei. And the Chochmeh of a person's nefesh is the Yud. And when a person does this Aveda, so it blemishes the Yud of the neshama. Und der Eis is verbunden mit die zwei Misparim Eser und Esrim. So the letter of Yud is hinted or is connected to the two numbers of 10 and 20. Yud is Eser. The Yud is the equivalent of the number of 10. On Yud, if you spell out Yud, Yud Vav B'milui, Yud Vav Dalet, Patreft Esrim. So then it makes up the number 20. So the number 10 and 20 that Alter Rebbe brings there is not just by chance, but it actually hints to the place where the blemish of this Aveda is. Davon verstehen. So the question here on this is, derin was the Alter Rebbe retta. The point that Alter Rebbe speaks about here, as men darf lefidezu fasten pa'amim rabbis gefi mispar shachata. That this opinion is that one should fast as many times as the actual Aveda was done. This is true regarding any Aveda where there are various different amount of fasts. On Ameitzi Zerel of Atala, this Aveda here of Zerel of Atala, Verto gebracht bloß als Beispiel. It's just being brought here as an example. Kogain Ameitzichul, as Alter Rebbe himself emphasizes when he says Kogain, it's just an example. Was is negeye da zu merame sein in welcher Art es ist peigen dem dazekechet. So why is it relevant here, where the discussion is not about specifically this Aveda, but about amount of fasts, to emphasize that the number of times is related to the blemish of this Aveda? Was wird gebracht bloß als Dogma, since it's just being brought here as an example. The Shaila is noch starker, the question is even stronger. Der Diuk in dem, was the Alter Rebbe chapton die Zoll Esai Esrim, this that the Rebbe father points out, that the Alter Rebbe chose specifically this example of 10 or 20 times, is nit was sagt die Zoll und nit kein andere. The point here is not that the Alter Rebbe says this number and not any other number. Was demult, what man gekent, what given mokim leima bedeuchik al kapanim. So then, if that would be the question, then at least you can say as a squeeze, and you could say as follows: as we bald adav gebma gewisse mispar, the Alter Rebbe is looking to give a certain number. Kleibt reis, as a mispar was is meramis dem pegam von dem chet was hat gebracht ledugme. So therefore, the Alter Rebbe chooses the number that fits with the actual Aveda that's brought here as an example. So then it would be a good answer. Nor the shaila is, however, the question really is, as atzol misuyim do is b'chlal liberik. Giving any number here is completely extra. Oich when avold gesagt tzarich lesanis peidal al kol pam. If the Alter Rebbe would just simply say that you would have to fast 84 times for every time this Aveda is done, or any similar kind of language. Not quoting any number at all for how many times this Aveda was done. Nothing would be missing in the content of what's being said. It's tamua, so therefore it's difficult to understand. How can you say, as the Alter Rebbe, that the Alter Rebbe here is adding an example of the number of times this Aveda was done, an example that's not necessary at all, in order to hint to the blemish that there is with one specific Aveda, was bringt sich da not als Dogma, which is being quoted there just as an example. So the whole thing is completely irrelevant. Why does the Alter Rebbe find it necessary to highlight here this Aveda with this particular number indicating the blemish of this Aveda? Now, Siv Gimel, the Rebbe continues and says, later on in Tanya, the Alter Rebbe brings more opinions about this, regarding the fasts. And there, again, there's a comment from the Rebbe's father on what the Alter Rebbe says there. Similar to this question here, Slibvas bringt Alter Rebbe a Dugme von a gewissen Mispar. Why the Alter Rebbe brings an example of a certain number of times the sin was done, Esther or Yesrim, 10 or 20 times, is dofaran noch a die klol yoiser, or was the Tate stellt sich nicht, which the Rebbe's father does not stop on. Okay, actually, the Rebbe will discuss the continuation of the Alter Rebbe in Igeres Hatshuva, where the Rebbe's father will over there have another comment in the next ice. Here in this ice, the Rebbe asks an additional question on what we quoted before here from Igeres Hatshuva. Why is it at all necessary for the Alter Rebbe to give any example from a specific Aveda? So in addition to the question before, why does the Alter Rebbe have to give a number of times any individual Aveda was done? Why is it necessary to point out an example of an Aveda? If the Alter Rebbe would just say, one that sins an Aveda, so mispar atzaymis loise achet, and then to discuss what exactly is the amount of times you have to fast for that Aveda. Nit geben de kein Beispiel von welcher es ist chet, without giving any example what Aveda we're dealing with, wollte ich alles given verstandig. Everything would be understood. Why does the Alter Rebbe have to give this example of this Aveda of Meitzi Zerel Levatala? Ich darf verstehen. Another question is, was la'achre wie sagt, v'im chot beze esay esrim poma derech moshel, tzorech lasanis, esay esrim pomim pedalit. So the Alter Rebbe says you have to fast 20 or 20 times, 10 or 20 times 84, is er meisef v'chein loilam. The same applies forever. Is oich, as oich, wenn chot beze mehr von esrim pomim, darf fasten pedal tzemis for jeden mal. That even if he sinned more than 20 times, he has to continue and fast for whatever number of times it is, 84 times for each fast. Why does the Alter Rebbe have to add this? What is he teaching me with this? Why would there be any room to say that one has to fast the number of times of what he sinned, but that's only up to 20 times? And in order to negate such a thought, such an idea, the Alter Rebbe has to add, no, forever. No, it could be many more times and you still have to fast the same number of fasts. Why would I think that there's any difference after the number of 20? So here in Siv Dalet, the Rebbe will discuss also what the Alter Rebbe says further here in Igeres Hatshuva about these fasts. In der Ara Amura von Taten is mevayed in Chatzah Yigol noch Hadiyah in Igeres Hatshuva. So in this comment from the Rebbe's father, he explains in parentheses another point, another diuk in Igeres Hatshuva. In selben Perik weiter sagt der Alter Rebbe. In the same chapter, this is Perik Gimel, the Alter Rebbe says, Kol Bal Nefesh Chulu, a person that's a Bal Nefesh, person that's on a higher level, Yachmer al Atzmoi lahashlim al Kolpanim, should be stringent with himself, to fast completely at least once during his entire lifetime, the number of fasts for all avedes from these very severe sins, which one is liable for death for them, even if the punishment of death is only from heaven. And here the Alter Rebbe again gives the example for this Aveda of Haitzah Zar Levatala, 84 fasts, to see to it to fast at least once in his lifetime these 84 fasts. And it can be pushed off to shorter days. So you can push it off to shorter days and he'll fast 10 fasts, for example, during the winter. Is mevayed the tate. So on this, that the Alter Rebbe says here, the Rebbe's father explains, as das was the zokta ke'eser tainius. Why does the Alter Rebbe give the example of 10 fasts? Is val ke'eser gam ken yud, because eser again is this number of yud representing the yud where the blemish of this aveda is. Is eichendem inyan Da adia kloli yoser. So here regarding this, there's also a more general question to be asked on what the Alter Rebbe says, or was the Tata stellt sich nicht, on which the Rebbe's father does not clearly address. So was bringt the Alter Rebbe a dugme kagoyin heitzah zerel levatala chulu b'chlal. When the Alter Rebbe is making this point that a person should see to it to fast once in his lifetime for these very severe avedas, why does he have to point out and highlight this one aveda of zerel levatala? Additionally, the question is, wie bald as the Eis Yud is verbunden nicht nur mit dem Mispar Esser, noch euch mit dem Mispar Esrim Kanal, if the letter Yud is connected not only to the number 10, but also to the number 20, as brought before, as the Rebbe's father pointed out regarding what the Alter Rebbe says earlier. What is this? What is the reason? Looking at it on a deeper level, was by when the Alter Rebbe speaks about fasting during the winter, bringt the Mispar Esser. The Alter Rebbe brings only the number of 10, unet the Mispar Esser, and he doesn't bring the number of 20 like he did earlier when he says Esther oy Esrim. Everything is precise in the way the Alter Rebbe says something. So before the Rebbe goes into the answer for these questions here, in Sifei, the Rebbe gives us an introduction regarding the comments of the Rebbe's father on Tanya here. Shengerat Filmal, it was already mentioned many times, regarding the Rebbe's father's comments, both on Zoyar and on Tanya, as mitzad kame taimim, that for various reasons, in papir und tint, which includes also the fact that he didn't have much space on paper or even ink to use, they were written very, 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 very concise, very short. But if you learn it and you look deeply into the words that he did write, Zetman, you can see that by the short words that he wrote, even things that he didn't address clearly, it does answer other questions. In the and these are questions that come up over there in those places where the comments are written. And sometimes from the comments that he writes in one place, you can see a pshat or an answer to something in another area there in Tanya. This is in addition to, obviously, what he writes clearly and he explains. Furthermore, even though when you look at most of the comments of the Rebbe's father, so what you see is he stops on different expressions in the languages that are being used, whether in Tanya or in Zohar. However, you can see in many of these comments, if you analyze them properly, that by these few comments on the languages, it explains and clarifies the general content of the idea regarding which he's writing these comments. The same is true over here in this case with this commentary on Tanya. It seems like he's only coming to address just this choice of example 10, 20, and then later on 10. But wer durch dem diuk, or der ha'ara that is, verämpft noch kama v'kama de yukim, koile leuch de yukim de le'el siv gimel dalet. But by what the Rebbe's father addresses clearly, it answers other questions as well, including the questions that was asked earlier. Und noch mehr, furthermore, durch der ha'ara wird mevur euch der teichen klali von the minyan. This commentary, this short commentary, explains the general content of the whole subject that the Alter Rebbe is discussing here. The tam favos lefidei achas tzarich lisanis mispar tzeimis leise chet pamim rabes k'fiyah mispar shachata. Explaining what is the basis of this opinion that if one aveda is repeated many times, then you fast all those amount of times for this aveda. Uneich the tam, and also explaining generally the idea favos kol bal nefesh shachmer alatzme lahashlam kol panim pamachas chula. Why every person that's a bal nefesh should at least be stringent with himself to fast fully these fasts at least once in his lifetime. Ukadul kaman, as we'll see here. And this is actually the general idea of what the Rebbe is going to do with all of the comments of his father on Tanya here in Igeres Hatshuva. He'll explain them and point out how these comments that seem to be addressing just a few words explain the entire subject there with a greater depth. So the Rebbe begins in Sifov with the explanation. So we can say the explanation for all of this as follows. In dem Pagam was the blemish that is caused in a person's soul by an Aveda, and therefore to rectify this, the tshuva for this, so generally speaking, this includes three different aspects. Aleph, the first is, wie bald as mit jeden chet is man over ofen zivi from melech malchi amlochem hakadosh baruch hu. Being that every aveda done, one is transgressing on Hashem's command, the King of Kings. Was das ist die nekuda haklolis und the tzad hashove von all avedas. This is the general point and the common denominator of all avedas. Is man durch jeder aveda koilelech durch bittul mitzvah saseh. So therefore, any aveda, including one that nullifies or does not fulfill a mitzvah saseh, poirik von sich oil malchus shamayim. He removes by this the yoke of heaven, umeverta rasha. And this person then could be classified as a rasha, as the Alter Rebbe says in Tanya, right in the beginning in Perek Aleph. So every Aveda, even though it's one specific Aveda, but really there's a general prikasel, there's a general removal of the yoke of heaven, of accepting Hashem as king, that's being expressed by this one action here. And the tikkun of them is, so as far as this aspect of the Aveda is concerned, so to rectify this, what is the tshuva? That he should leave this Aveda and make up in his mind very clearly that he will never do this again. This is the Rambam's expression. And the way the Alter Rebbe puts it, that he should make up in his heart with a full heart, not to return to this foolishness, to rebel in Hashem's kingdom, and not to again transgress on the mitzvah of the king, God forbid. So here we see that the point is the tshuva includes in general, not just not to do this specific action, but not to do an aveda, any aveda, to rebel against the king, against Hashem. By this resolution and accepting for the future, that is the real essence of what tshuva is about. There is also the point of regretting the past, which intensifies the tshuva, but the main idea of the tshuva is the acceptance and resolution for the future. He immediately leaves this status of being a rasha. This complete and full heart resolution can be in just one moment, in 1 second. As the halacha is in Gemara and in Paiskim, as durch ein hirer tshuva wird a rasha gomer a tzadik gomer. From being a complete rasha, he can be transformed into being a complete tzaddik. So this is one aspect of what the Aveda did and what Tshuva accomplishes. Beis, another point of what happens when a Yid does an Aveda. Hayais v'de tmimus and shleimus from the Evarei HaNefesh is totally in the mitzvahs. The wholeness and the completeness of a person's limbs, the various different faculties that he has, are all dependent on utilizing them for mitzvahs, is durch ein bittel von a mitzvah saseh. So by nullifying one of the mitzvahs, by transgressing and doing a mitzvah leisase, this brings a blemish and a lack in this particular limb, was the shayach to them mitzvah pratis, which relates to that one mitzvah on which he transgressed. A person has taryag kaiches and ivarim, and there are taryag mitzvahs. Each mitzvah relates to a different Aver, and therefore when a person does an Aveda, so there's a blemish in that one limb that corresponds to this mitzvah. In order to rectify this individual and specific blemish in this Aver and this limb, so then there are various different things that have to be done related to this particular Aveda. Which includes also the specific number of fasts related to this specific Aveda. That's the second point of the Aveda and the Tshuva on the Pagam Proti in this Aveda. Gimel, the third point of what happens when a Yid does an Aveda. Hayais as a kilkul in an Eva Proti macht euch am en kilkul ze in alle evarim. Since, as we see physically, when a person has an issue, that there's something that's unhealthy with one limb in his body, so this brings somewhat of a problem in the health of the rest of his body, in the other limbs as well. Peilt jeder Avere a Pegam in alle Keuches und Evarim von Menschen. So this brings about some level of a blemish in all of the powers and faculties, or all of the different limbs of the person. Even by the Avere Pratis in one Avere, it brings about some individual blemish regarding the individual other Evarim of the person. When the Kolshe came from them, this is understood that with a Kavachaimer, that it's definitely so, from the fact every action a person does has its impact on the entire world at large. So most definitely, in the person himself, an Aveda done that affects one limb also has an effect on the other limbs of the person's body. And the far, so therefore, is midarke Hatshuva. So from those things that are included, as the Rambam writes, in the person's ways of when he's doing tshuva, that it has to be included in doing tshuva, not only that, he has to have the full acceptance and stay very far from that Aveda that he did, this includes also changing and transforming all of his actions to the good, to the better, and going in a straight path. Because there was a certain blemish that was caused by all the other areas in the person's life as well. So this is regarding the entire person in general, what the blemish of an Aveda accomplishes. So in Sif Zayin, the Rebbe continues and explains how this applies to one particular limb in the body to focus on. Now, the tshuva and the kapara for this particular limb, which was involved in the Aveda. Taira is the klolus of pratis nemra. We know that everything in Taira is spoken about in generalities, in general terms, upratis, and then the same that what you find in a general sense could then be found in a more specific sense when you relate it to a specific situation or a specific level. Is in jeder eine von die drei inyanische besivav, each one of the points pointed out in the previous sif, the 3 points of what happens when a person does an Aveda, zene faram beprati is dugmas the alle drei inyanim. So you have also, similar to this, more specifically regarding the Aveda and the blemish that there is in a particular limb in the person's body. So you have it also specifically over here, 3 levels to this blemish. So here regarding what we're speaking about, there mispar atzaimis was is bestimmt for Avedes pratius. When it comes to the number of fasts, which is set according to specific Avedes, which require a certain amount of fasts. Was ist verbunden mit Pratis de Pegam, which is related to and represents the specific blemish that there is in this limb. The zweite in the leil. The second point brought before, what happens when a person does an Aveda. Zenen den Pegam gufe faran dugmas die drei Inyanim manal. So in this blemish, in this particular Aver, when a Yid does an Aveda, in this specific level, you have 3 aspects, similar to the way it is in general, regarding the whole person, that there are 3 aspects of the Aveda. In the specific Aver that did the Aveda, you also have 3 aspects to what the Aveda does here. So the explanation for this is, since all limbs of a person's body are related to one another and are included from one another, right? All the limbs of a person's body, which carries the energies and the various different kaiches of a person, which comes from the nefesh itself, where it includes everything together as one. So therefore, even every aver, when it comes out, and each aver is in its specific place, but after all, it's all avarim of one person, stemming from one nefesh, from one soul, and therefore they are always linked and connected and included from one another. So therefore, it comes out as in jeder Ewe zene faran drei inyanim. That in each limb of a person, there are 3 different aspects. Aleph, zayin etzemohos. First, his very identity of what it is, its function for what it is specifically. Beis, the second point is, wie is koil in sich alle andere evarim. Since other evarim are related to this one particular aver, so therefore, within this one particular limb, it includes within it a connection to all the other evarim. It's not just an aver for itself, disconnected to anything else, but it's connected to the entire nefesh and all the other kaiches of a person. And therefore, in each individual aver, you have a certain aspect of all the other evarim in it. And then Gimel, the third point is, wie gefindt sich in alle evarim. then the influence and the connection that there is of this one particular aver, as it extends out and has an influence on the other avarim in their place in the body where they are. So that's a third point, similar to the point before, that an avera done in one aver then affects the rest of the avarim. So this aver as well, the blemish that there is in this aver contains in it also a certain blemish on the influence that this aver has when it extends into the rest of the body. So the full is verstandig. From this we understand, as the pagam from the aver proti, that when we speak about a blemish in one particular limb, was vert durch der avera protis, that happens through an avera that a person does, is benigeya alle drei inyanim manal. This contains within it the blemish on all three levels mentioned before, the general blemish that there is in the aver, and then there's the aver of the aspect of the other avarim included in this aver, and then by the avera here in this limb, in this aver, it also affects the influence that this aver has on the rest of the limbs of the body where they are. So now, based on this, we can come back to understand what the Alter Rebbe says in Tanya when he talks about the number of fasts that you have to fast. So here in Sivches, the Rebbe will quote the three opinions that there are regarding the number of fasts. And earlier in the Sikh, the Rebbe only quoted one opinion, which is that you have to fast as many times as one Aveda was repeated. You have to fast every time the number of fasts set for that fast again and again. But there's actually three opinions about this. Now, v'yeshleimar, so we can say, as the pegam in the etzem uhus from the meiver, the blemish that relates to the very identity of this, the function of this aver for itself, for this limb. Werd gemacht in ganzen gleich beim ersten Mal von dem Chet. That blemishes completely. It has a full effect when the aved is done the first time. Es kommt nicht zu in dem, an hin nikri akapanim, durch tan demselben Chet noch einmal. It doesn't, nothing is added in the blemish here, in this aver itself, at least not something, the primary aspect of what this blemish is. It's not added anything to it when you do the avera again and again. The pegam in the pratim from the mever. However, when it comes to the second point, the aspect of the pegam that there is in various details of the other evarim that are included in this aver, the evarim haklulim boy b'chayetze b'zeh. This is not just the aver for itself, but there are the other evarim that are included here in this aver. Werd nishlam erst beim ton dem chet and dritte mal. So the blemish only has a full effect to blemish this aver only after it's done three times. Wie the Alter Rebbe bringt, as the Alter Rebbe brings in from Zoya, what it says in Zoya, zimnet liso, when a person does an avera the third time, is pashit hahu kisme. So then the stain, the blemish of this avera spreads misitra da lesitra da, from one side to the other side. It extends fully and it blemishes this aver fully. As beim dritten Mal nam durch den Fleck, at the third time, this stain penetrates completely dem aver was the shaykh to dem chet durch and durch. It permeates and penetrates completely this aver. But this is not referring to the muhus of this aver itself. Once the aver was blemished by the avera, so the aver itself, for what it is, that's blemished right away completely the first time. But this aver is related to the rest of the body and it has different elements in it related to the rest of the body. So those details of this aver is not fully blemished until the avera is done three times. That's the second blemish of this limb in the body. The pegam was vert in the andere evarim. Now, the third point, when a yid does an avera with one aver, and by extension, because this aver is connected and related to the rest of the body, so this, what's happened to this aver has an effect now, an influence in the other limbs of the body, was is dashem beim ersten Mal, which already this blemish begins at the first time he does this avera, but however, it never fully blemishes the other evarim completely. We can say from one end to the other. While the averis from the evarim is an itover, because after all, the other limbs were not involved in this avera. They're being affected by the influence that there is from one aver that did do the avera, but because they're not directly involved in the avera, they'll never become fully blemished. So therefore, mistavra loymar, it's logical to say, as durch jedem mal da asiyas achet, when a person repeats this avera again and again, kommt zu dem ahisafa. Every time the blemish, the effect of this blemish on the other evadim of the person's body keeps on getting stronger and stronger. So here, every number, every aveda adds more to the blemish. Let me just stop a moment before we go further here. Just to point out what we're talking over here about is an aveda, and the point here is to understand that when a yid does an aveda, it's not just an action that was done, and of course he has to do tshuva because he went against the will of Hashem, but it's just the action, that's it. The point that we see over here is every action that a person does has life in it, has a soul in it, his neshama is involved in it, and when a yid, God forbid, does an aveda, it actually creates a blemish, a stain in that connection that he has to Hashem. And there's various levels to this blemish. This is a real thing that internally, that there's a tremendous effect on his connection to Hashem. So this gives us a different appreciation and understanding what is happening if, God forbid, a yid does an aveda. Let's continue inside. Das ist the beer from the drei days. Was Elu ve'elu divrei Elokim Chaim. This explains the three opinions that the Alter Rebbe quotes here in Perek Gimel of Igeres Hatshuva, and all of these opinions are all true. Vifel moment da fasten the misbar atzemis von achet. How many times a person should fast for an aveda? If it was repeated many times. Is it fasten for jedem mal bazunder the erste day? Do you fast for every time you repeat it? You have to fast again all those number of fasts. Or the second opinion is genug, the misbar atzemis einmal, the zweite day, or it's enough to fast just once for that aveda, and then for all the other times repeat it, it's already included in that. Other than that, fasten gimel pamim, or one should fast for the first 3 times that he did this aveda for this amount, and then he doesn't have to fast again. And the Alter Rebbe says on this, the hachra hamukabelas. This is sort of the compromise in the two opinions here. So these 3 approaches relates to the 3 different aspects of the blemish that happens when an aveda is done. To leave them tikkun apagam in them etzem hus from the mever, in order to rectify the blemish that there is in this, the aver itself, is maspik the misbar tzemis pamachas. It's enough to fast the number of fasts 1 time for this aveda. As explained before, because over here, the first time the aveda is done, the blemish is complete, and therefore every additional time doesn't add anything. To leave them tikkun apagam in the andre varim, in order to rectify the blemish that is caused by influence indirectly into the other evarim that are connected here. That's something that every time the aveda is repeated, so it intensifies the blemish more and more. So you have to fast again and again the number of fasts to rectify that. Und zu lieb dem tikkun apagam in the andere evarim wie sie sind kol in dem aver, but then now to rectify the blemish that there is in the details of this aver itself, what exists within it, its relation to the other evarim. For that from fasting gimel pamim, you have to fast 3 times, as the Alter Rebbe quotes from the Zohar, because after 3 times the blemish, the stain, is penetrated in these details through and through. The Yeshleimar, so based on this we can say, azos is the tam from them. So this is the reason for the fact, was Alter Rebbe nemt on the achra mukubelas, even though the Alter Rebbe does accept the compromise opinion that says you fast for the first 3 times, les anes gimel pamim kefia mispar atzemis lechetzeh, 3 times for this aveda that was repeated. Von deswegen paskinter as in dem ersten mal mispar atzemis. Nevertheless, the Alter Rebbe says that when it comes to the first time fasting these number of fasts, soll man machme sein mehr wenn die andere 2 mal. One should be more stringent about this than the other times of fasting for the other times that he sinned. When it comes to the other additional times, the Alter Rebbe says is that if you're fasting half days till chatzais, so then 2 half days you can combine it as a full fast. But the number of fasts for the first time the aveda was done, one should not combine it, but he should actually fast full days. So the reason why the Alter Rebbe is being more stringent about the first time is the pegam in etzem hus von ever for sein tikkun is durch misbar atzemis pamachas, because to rectify here the blemish that there is in this, the very identity of this limb itself, and that's the first time you're fasting this number of fasts, is chama yoser from the pegam and evarim haklulim by. That's much more severe than the blemish that there is in the details, in the other aspects of the person that are included here in this aver. Which will be rectified by fasting the additional 2 times. So So therefore, the Alter Rebbe is more stringent about this. Okay, so we have here a better understanding to what these different numbers of fasts are, the various opinions are, based on understanding what is the blemish of the Aveda is. So now here in Sif Tes, the Rebbe comes back now to explain why the Alter Rebbe highlights this one Aveda of Zera Levatala. This is also from the reasons was bringen dik die erste Deye, when the Alter Rebbe brings the first opinion. That one should fast whatever amount of times that the Aveda was repeated, is the Alter Rebbe Meisiv Kagayna Meitzi Zera Levatala. The example given is this Aveda of Zera Levatala. B'negeya tzashichva zera zok the Rambam. When it comes to the semen of the human being, the Rambam that is says as follows: Kol sheteitze b'yoser haguf kala. The more there's an emission of the body, the more the person's body gets weakened. V'koichoi kala v'chaya v'ivdim, and he loses his energy and he loses his life. The fun is move on. So from what the Rambam here says about the zera of a person, we understand as in dem chet von itzah zera levatala, that when one wastes this emission, is mer begiloi. Over here you have more highlighted aleph vidachet poilt oich in alle evare yagov, how this waste affects all the other limbs of the person's body, as the Rambam says that it affects the rest of the body and the health of the whole person. Beis vidurch jeder mal vert gresse de pagam, and how each time each added aveda adds to the blemish of the entire person, as the nature is regarding this emission. On the Rebbe is the Alter Rebbe Meisiv Kagana Meitzi Zera Levatala Cholo. Therefore, when the Alter Rebbe speaks about having to fast every time when this Aved is repeated, he gives this example of Zera Levatala. Valdurichem brengen die Dugme, by bringing this example, werd musber by Alachatayim. So even though this is more emphasized by this Aved, but this actually also explains this fact that it's true by all Avedas, that Tam from Dendeya, the reason of this opinion, as when the fasten al kol pam upam, that one should fast for every time the Aveda is repeated, all the number of fasts. That's the reason why here this Aveda of Zera Levatala is highlighted. Now there's an additional thing that we can see here regarding this specific Aveda that the Rebbe will explain here in Sif Yud, which relates also to the other points that the Alter Rebbe speaks about regarding the fasts. Eide der Rambam sagt, v'chol sheteitze b'yoser haguf kol chulu v'chayev v'ivdim. Before the Rambam says the point quoted before, that Zera causes, when it comes out, it causes, if it's too much, then the whole body will lose its life and its health, is maktin. The Rambam says before this, shechva zera hi koyach haguf v'chayav. The semen is the energy of the body and its life. So this is actually saying an additional point here. This haste, what this means is, as das was shechva zera poilt ifn guf, this effect that this emission has on the body is this atitza or mesuva from them was he is the koyach haguf. It's a result of the fact that zera is the energy of the body. So we can explain what this means is, as das was shichva zera he koyach haguf, the fact that this zera is the energy of the body is nitir etzem. That's not actually the very essence of what it is. Das was shichva zera is koyach haguf, the fact that this is the energy of the body, as he is koilel oich dem koyach from ganzen guf, that it includes in it, this one drop includes in it the entire body, as the Rebbe brings here, that from this the whole entire body of a human being is formed, and it includes in it the entire body, is an inyan noisaf. It's an additional feature of the energy and what it contains in it. In etzem, however, its very essence, identity is atipa nekuda versus hecha von sir. It's a drop, it's one point which is higher of any form. It's not formed or including in it anything. Furthermore, regarding the zera, we can say the nekuda from the tipus zera is verbunden mit nekudas hanefesh. The point of the drop of zera is connected to the very deepest point of a person's soul. Umitzadem was ir muhus is a nekuda tipa, and because the zera, its very identity is just one drop, was is verbunden mit nekudas hanefesh, and therefore it's connected to the very deepest point in a person's soul. The Rebbe is yikailel oich dem koyach haguf. As a result, it has also included in it the koyach, the health of the entire body, and when there's too much wasted emission, it has an effect on the entire person's life. So we can see over here that within the inyan of zera, you have the three different aspects to it. You have the fact that it has an effect on the entire body of the person. Then you have the fact that within it is included the entire guf of a person. And then you have its etzem uhus, its very being, which is one drop, one nekuda, which is the nekuda of the nefesh of the person. So here, from this we can understand why, regarding this Aveda, there's something that's more stringent that we don't find by other Avedas. So in Sifir Aleph, the Rabbi explains, the fun is verstandig. So from this we can understand when it comes to this Aveda of Zera Levatale, as der Choymer HaPegam von der Chet is benigea, so alle drei Inyanim anal. So you have this, the three aspects brought before. What happens in the blemish of an Aveda, you have it very much highlighted here in this Aveda of Zera Levatale. Mitzaderuf was the Tippes Hazera is koil dem koyach hagof peult auf den ganzen gof. Because of the fact that this Zera includes in it the power of the entire body. And it has also an influence on the rest of the health of the body. Is there pegam in andere vorim? So this creates a blemish in the rest of the body. And all the other limbs. Vizizen and kol in demever, in both aspects. Both the way it's included within the zera, within this drop, vizizen and b'mekaimam. And then also each aver in its place, its health in its place. And this happens through the Aveda of this wasted emission. So there's a blemish in both of these aspects. So it's chame yaiser v'in andere chatoim. This is more stringent, more severe than other Avedas because you have this very much highlighted, and it's something that's very real when it comes to this Aveda of Zera Levatala. Or mitzad ir etzem uhos tipe, but then its very essence of what it is, this drop, is oich der pegam in etzem uhos from the mever. So here there is the pegam, there's the blemish in this aver itself, that happens through this Aveda. This is also more severe than all other Avedas. Hayes as the chet is pagan. Nit not in the etzem uhos von eve prati. It's not just a blemish in the very identity of one particular limb, nor in the etzem uhos von aza inyin was is verbunden mit nekudas hanefesh. We're talking over here about the very essence of an aver, or of this drop, which is connected to the very deepest point of the soul of the Yid. So therefore, this again also highlights to a much greater degree what's the extent of the chet, or the pegam of this chet, regarding this aver itself, that it touches the very nekud of the nefesh of the person. So now from here, we come back to explain the various different number of fasts that the Alter Rebbe speaks about regarding this Aveda. Verstehen, was die Dogme von Eitzah Zera Levatale bringt Alter Rebbe in dem Perik dreimal. When the Alter Rebbe speaks about the number of fasts related to this Aveda of Zera Levatale, the Alter Rebbe brings this example of Zera Levatale 3 times in this chapter here. By the day, when the Alter Rebbe brings the opinion that says that one should fast again for every time the Aveda is repeated, is a meisiv kogain, a meisiv Zera Levatale. Bringing this example. By the Achra Mukabalis, Leisanis Gimel Pomim, when the Alter Rebbe brings the compromise opinion to fast only 3 times that the Aveda was repeated, is a meisiv. He spells out the Hainu Reish Nun Beis Saimis Al Eitzah Shich Zera Levatale, which would add up to 252 fasts for this Aveda. When he says that one should fast at least once for all the fasts for the Aveda done, is a meisiv kagayin l'haitzah zera levatala pedal tzaimis pa'machas chulu. Again, he gives the example, 84 fasts for this Aveda. So the reason why the Alter Rebbe is bringing all these examples, the tam of them v'sarach lisan is kafiyah mispah shachata. The reason one has to fast for each time the Aveda is repeated is mitzaderov was durch ein chet vert hapegam euch in the andere evarim v'zezenen b'mekayim. As explained earlier, this is a result of the fact that the Aveda done brings about a blemish not only in this aver but also in the influence that it has in other evarim, the way they are in their place. The time of lisan is gimel pamim. The reason for fasting only 3 times is mitzad and pegam in the evarim v'zezenen kol in them aver. So 3 times relates to the blemish that there is for the other aspect of the limbs of the body that are included here in this Aveda. Was a shaykh to dem chet relating to this Aveda here. On the time of lahashal makapanim pamachas, and the reason to fast 1 time for this Aveda, ganze Tzaimis, and one should fast full day fasts. Nit kein beis chatzai yom, not to combine 2 half-day fasts. Is mitzadam chomer from the pagan was is an etzem husa. That's because of the severity of the blemish that there is in this aver itself, which is the strongest pagan. Kanal Baruch Sivches has explained at length before in Sivches. So now, all of this, the Alter Rebbe highlights dafke this aver of Shuch Chazer Levatole. Und die 3 Yonim werden musber durch ein Bringen in die 3 Ertanal, die Dugma von Etzah Zer Levatole. This is explained better and it's understood when the Alter Rebbe brings this example of Zer Levatole. Varim in dem chet zenen mudgish yoiser alle 3 Yonim. Because here in this Aveda of the Zera of a person, you see very strongly the 3 blemishes that the Aveda does. Based on what the Rambam says, we can see clearly in the nature of this Zera. So therefore the Alter Rebbe highlights the Aveda of Zera Levatole in order to explain the content of the entire Perek, the different aspects of the blemishes that happens when a Yid does an Aveda. So now based on this, we come back to understand the number of times that the Alter Rebbe brings Eser or Esrim that the Rebbe's father points out and explains. So in Sif Yud Gimel, the Rebbe continues, Al Pikal Anal, wat man verstehen. Based on all this, we'll understand. Was in der Dugme, was der Alter Rebbe bringt bei der Deye, shetzarech lesanes cholo, kefia mispa shachata, when the Alter Rebbe is bringing an example that you have to fast according to the number of times that the Aveda was repeated, zokten it stam tzarech lesanes pedal lo kol pam. He doesn't just simply say that you have to fast 84 times for each time, or that alashon chayetze bezeh, or a similar expression. Not as mefaret. The Alter Rebbe gives an example and specifies eser oy esrim chulu. That would be 10 or 20 times, v'chein la'olam, and so too, whatever other number of times it would be. What's the point of specifying these 3 details here? Durch fasten, pa'amim rabbis, kifia mispar hashachata, when one fasts many times, based on the amount of times he sinned, is memesaken ale drayin yonim from the pagan. It comes out that he's rectifying all aspects of the blemish that he did with the Aveda. When he fasts the number of fasts the first time is memisaken the pagam and the etzem hus from the mever. So now you have rectified the blemish that there is in this very the identity of this aver itself. Durch fasten noch 2 Mal, by fasting additional 2 times is memisaken euch den pagam in the evarim aklulim by. So now you also will affect, or you will take away, you'll rectify the blemish for the other aspects of the limbs of the rest of the body that are included here in this limb. Und durch die andere Tanesim, noch die erste 3 Mal. And then when you fast all additional fasts after these 3 first times, is memesakin euch de pegam in the evarim wie sie sind b'mekayma. Then you rectify the additional blemishes that's caused by the Aveda in the other evarim, by extension in the whole body of the person that was caused indirectly. Und der Rebbe is the Alter Rebbe mefaret 3 Eifanim. So this explains why the Alter Rebbe gives the example, and he says 3 details here. Eser, Esrim, 10, 20, und Oilam, and then furthermore forever. Weil die 3 Eifanim bringen reis die 3 in Yonim Hanal Kedel Kaman. Because these 3 points, or possibilities, 10, 20, or even further, express the 3 aspects of atoning for the blemishes, or correcting these blemishes that there are here. What's the explanation? What's the significance of these 3 numbers? So the Rebbe explains in Sif Yudalet. It says, Mavur in Chassidus. It's explained in Chassidus, Be'inyin Milui Ha'isius. When it comes to the letters of the Aleph Beis, and you have also the letters, the way it's spelled out. Like here, we're talking about the Yud, which besides the actual letter of Yud, it's spelled out as Yud Vav Dalet. As der Milui Fin Yederais is not Kedei Lefarish Luzulosai. That when you fill in the full letter to spell it out, so that's the aspect of the letter which is to be spelled out for someone else, to express it to someone else. And the example for this is brought from this letter, the letter of Yud. Whether in a person's thought or when you write, so the letter Yud is just thought of or written as one letter, the Yud itself. When you want to express it in words, you want to express it to someone else, dann darf man zugeben euch sein Milui. The Osi is Vav Dalet. So you say Yud, so you're expressing the letter with the Vav and the Dalet that pronounce this letter. But Rafa Pikain is Oich der Milui Vav Dalit Kolol Frier in the Mais Yud Gufa. That Vav and Dalit is really included in the Yud itself, but it's just not spelled out when it's just written on paper, just a Yud. But then when you spell it out and you pronounce it, so the Vav and Dalit is heard as well. Aber, on the other hand, Oich Zayin de Kolol in the Mais, even when you have the Vav and Dalit included in the letter itself, Vibalt that is Nor Kedei Lefarish Luzolosai, that Vav and Dalit is the aspect of the letter which is pronounced and heard when you say it, speaking to someone, is a nit nechshav mipchines atzmos al rak dov noisev al atzmos. It's not the essence of the letter itself, it's an additional feature included in the letter. The aspect of the letter that will be expressed when you pronounce it. Now, with this introduction, now we can understand why the three different possibilities Alter Rebbe chooses here, Eser, 10, Esrim, 20, und la'olam, or further, forever, are connected to the 3 points of rectifying the 3 different aspects of blemishes that happen when a person does an Aveda. Eser, der Mispar von Ois Yud Gufa. Eser refers to the number 10, which is the gematria of the letter Yud itself, versus Kedmus Tippa, so this is referring to the Pagam that there is just in the Yud itself, which also, the drop, the semen, also has the same shape as the Yud itself, is verbunden mit dem Pagam v'tigunai in the Mayach Gufa. This is connected to the blemish and rectifying the blemish that there is of this Aveda in the brain itself, in the Chachma itself. Esrin, and the number 20, the Mispah von Ois Yud b'miluai, which is the gematria of the letter Yud when you fill in and you spell it out with the Vav and Dalet. Mit dem Pagam und Tikkun in the Evaya Go, wie sie sind in Kol Mayach. This includes also to rectify the blemish that there is of the other of the Evadim, the other limbs of the person that are there included in the person's brain. And so to rectify those aspects of the blemish here, so for that, Alter Rebbe says the example of Esrin, what's the other details that goes out into the other Evadim, the way they are included over here in the Vav and the Dalet in the brain. On la'olam, and the Alter Rebbe adds, forever, the pa'amim was an mer von Esrim, if a person sinned more than 20 times, mit dem pegam v'tikunai in dem guf, oilam cotton. This is to rectify the blemish that had affected the entire body of the person, all the other evarim, by extension, indirectly, each limb in their place where it is. So this explains why the Alter Rebbe gives these 3 examples, Esa, Esrim, and La'olam. It's not just numbers and it's not just Stam, a remez relating to the particular nature of this Aveda, but this is also the explanation for Bechlal, the fasts and the blemishes and what these fasts accomplish on each different aspect of the blemishes of these Avedas. So with this we could also understand. Was in V'yisane b'chayre v'achad, when the Alter Rebbe says here that a person should fast in the winter, bringt er nor der Mispar Eser und nit Esrim. The Alter Rebbe brings only the example of fasting 10 fasts and not 20. V'yisane b'chayre v'achad, when the Alter Rebbe speaks about fasting in the winter, is in fasten peidalet tzaymis pa'machas. The Alter Rebbe here is talking about someone that's fasting these 84 fasts the first time to correct the blemish of the Aveda in this Aver for itself. Und the Rebbe is in dem shayech not a mispareser. Regarding the blemish in this Aver itself, what is the blemish here? The number 10, which represents the Yud itself, the letter Yud itself, which is the blemish in this Aver itself. Therefore here the Alter Rebbe only gives the example of Eser, indicating what the blemish that he's correcting by fasting this one time.